a major victory for Solidarity and the SA Childcare Association. The High Court in Pretoria ruled in their favour that all private preschooling institutions offering early childhood development services, including grade R and lower grades, be reopened immediately. Now, the Childcare Association entered the case as a friend of the court, arguing for the development and well-being of toddlers that would be stunned if they continued to stay at home. Judge Hans Fabricius noted in his judgment absurdities and irrationalities in the decision to keep ECDs closed. For more on this now, joined by the Managing Director of the South African Childcare Association that represents all ECDs, both in public and private, and that's Anton Van Der Merwe. Mr. Van Der Merwe, thanks very much for your time and welcome to the AM report. So my understanding of the judgment is that it just caters for those in private preschooling institutions, although it appears that the principle cited can actually be applied across the board. Do you get a sense that the judgment goes far enough?
Yes, I believe that is so. There's a lot of misconception about what is private and what is not. The only distinguishing factor is that some of the ECD centers are registered with the Department of Basic Education. That's not what this court case is all about. And some of them are registered with the Department of Social Development. And that's what we call the private. So even the NPO ECD centers, the partial care centers, fall under the private because it has private people or a person that runs it, that has set it up and is running it.
So typically speaking, all ECD centers should in fact be able to operate now, right?
Absolutely, and that is why we joined the court case as friend of the court, because we wanted to make sure that there is an understanding that this court case is for all ECDs in South Africa, be it private or be it NPO or may be in cities or in rural areas or wherever. Everybody was suffering so much with this prolonged closure that we need to make sure that everyone can have the opportunity of opening up now.
Yeah, and of course that needs to take place with the proper guidelines and precautions in place. The real fears, though, and I think this is a concern raised by government initially, is that there are some ECD centers that are neither private or public, depending on how you define it, but that are completely unregistered. How are we going to go about monitoring those institutions and making sure that children brought back to those properties are not actually put in harm's way?
Yes, the Department of Social Development with the Nelson Mandela Fund launched what they call the Vanguard Sally, which all these schools could register or should have registered with to get onto the databases. And DSD has also made provision that they will register or they will allow to open those schools who are unregistered. Now, it's not always to say that an unregistered school is not a good school, because there's such a lot of legislation and a lot of stuff that has to happen before you can get registered. But I believe that DSD has got it now for the first time. They may have the better data, and even with the self-assessment form that they have sent out, that all the schools that want to open have to self-assess and make sure that they are COVID-19 compliant, and that self-assessment form must be sent into the Department of Social Development, and then they may open. According to the self-assessment form, it itself says that. But I believe that we will have the data, and we have been propagating schools that they must be COVID-19 compliant before they can open.
So we don't really have an idea of how many of these ECD centers are unregistered. Am I understanding you correctly?
Yeah, that's a very good question, because no one even knows how many partial care centers or ECDs is in South Africa. There's just no way that anyone knows. People are quoting anything between 45,000 and maybe 90,000, 90,000. If you take all the day mothers and play groups and nursery schools, creches, whatever, and you put them into that basket. I believe that the last 6 or nearly 7 years we've been working with the ECD centers and assisting them to get registered. I believe that more than 50% of whatever amount we have is not registered, is non-registered. But again, it's not to say it's bad schools or not conforming to what is necessary to be able to run a school like that.
And I guess it's a long-standing issue that's just being exposed by COVID-19. So the court also went on to mention that, government appeared to change its goalpost when it comes to this matter, either by refusing to deal with the reopening of these institutions or placing unreasonable sort of expectations that would be needed to be fulfilled before the institutions can in fact be opened. Are you not worried that if things were to go sour, if things were to go south because of this decision, government could come back again and say, look, we'd always asked for more time, we'd always, asked that we take things a bit more cautiously than we are now. Are you not worried about that potential backlash, so to speak?
Yeah, we stay concerned about COVID-19 and the safety of children. That is our first priority. If anything happens and the scenario changes, then of course we will work together with government in terms of whatever measures have to be put in. But we must understand that there's a lot of scientific research that was done that children are not the most vulnerable group in terms of COVID-19. If they do get it, many times, most of the time, they are asymptomatic, and they also don't have the tendency to infect older people or grown-ups or the teachers or whatever. So that is on that premise that we are working at this point. If we do everything right, as right as we can within this context, then we have a good chance of being able to create a safe environment for the children, and the parents can then feel at ease to send them back.
Yeah, but what the well-rehearsed argument is suggesting is that whilst children themselves are not at risk, the people they interact with are. What's your response to that aspect of this back and forth?
Yes, the people that they interact with, but I mean they also interact with their parents, they interact with family, they interact with many other people, not only within the ECD or in the partial care center. With their interaction, we believe that in that interaction there may be some form of viral transfer, but we are quite sure and feel very, very sure about all the work that was done by the scientists, that it should not adversely affect our children. Many of the European countries when they wanted to take their kids back to school, they started with the very smallest, with the very youngest of children, because they are the safest group to bring back. We wanted to start right at the top, and then from the grade 12s come down, and I don't know when they thought to open up the pre-grade R's, but I mean that's just the other way around. If you look at the Scandinavian countries and so on, and the children and the preschools are running smoothly and good, and there's no real red lights flickering in that historical cases.
Have we been able to understand the worst case scenario? It's a question I posed to the Basic Education Department yesterday as well. And the reason why I asked this question is that it's important to know when to scale back, right? It's important to even know what the signs are that indicate that perhaps you should be scaling back before there's a catastrophe. Insofar as ECDs are concerned, has there been a conceptual understanding of that, of when exactly we should be pulling back from this decision?
Yes, I believe we as the industry or we are watching and listening and hearing, and if there is any movement towards the spike and that the spike does influence the children, then of course we have to take the measures that's necessary to then reverse whatever we are doing at this point in time. But again, research has shown that opening of schools has not added much to the spike in any other country as well. So I don't believe that that's really where the crisis is. But we will definitely on top of it, and we will listen to the knowledgeable people, the medical people, and so on, and we will move. If it's necessary to move, whichever side, we will, because the safety of the kids, of the children is paramount.
I think it's safe to say none of the research is really conclusive, but very quickly before I let you go, a big part of the argument to allow for the ECDs to open is to do with the right to basic education, right? In a context where there's so much anxiety, so much disruption, how much meaningful learning and development do you think will actually be able to take place with children returning to these institutions amid the pandemic?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and I thank you for asking that. Children are very, very adaptable, much more than adults. Adults are so set in their ways. Children, they are so adaptable. And fact is that a lot of their learning takes place within the context of play. And within play, they use their imagination a lot as well. So they divorce themselves from reality sometimes and start playing, and then in that play and pretend play, there's a lot of action that goes on there and a lot of psychological happenings within that context. But we're not saying that they should just stay there in that context. But what we are saying that children can adapt very well. And we can also teach children. I mean, a lot of stuff that we need to teach them about social distancing and so on. Playing a game, make them to play a game. We won't always be successful as with adults with social distancing or whatever the situation may be, but we have got the protocols. Department of Social Development put out a document on the 23rd of June, the Standard Operating Procedures, a 61-pager. It's a great document. It tells you exactly how to run your ECD center safely within this COVID-19. And then added to that, on the 21st of June, they put out the self-assessment, and the two go hand in hand. If the schools work with those two documents, they'll be fine. They'll be fine, really.
Well, we certainly hope so. Anton Van Der Merwe, let me thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it. Mr. Van Der Merwe is the Managing Director of the Southern African Childcare Association. Thanks very much indeed.